The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty gravel of Henderson County Livestock Auction, where pickup trucks lined the perimeter like weathered sentinels guarding secrets of rural life. 16-year-old Marcus Bradley stepped out of his grandfather's rusted Ford, his empty right sleeve pinned neatly against his faded denim jacket. The accident that claimed his arm 2 years ago had also claimed his confidence, but today, something different stirred within his chest. A peculiar mixture of determination and desperate hope that had driven him to spend every dollar he'd saved from his part-time job at Peterson's hardware store. The auction barn buzzed with the familiar energy of farmers, ranchers, and horse traders conducting business in low, gravelly voices, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. Marcus navigated through the crowd, acutely aware of the sideways glances and whispered comments that followed him wherever he went. His left hand clutched the worn envelope containing $347. The entirety of his modest savings accumulated over 18 months of stocking shelves, organizing inventory, and enduring the patient kindness of Mr. Peterson, who never made him feel inadequate, despite his physical limitation. The scent of hay, leather, and animal sweat permeated the air, with an earthiness that spoke of honest work and ancient partnerships between humans and horses. Marcus had grown up around these smells during summers spent at his grandfather's small ranch, before the farming accident that changed everything. Harold Bradley had been forced to sell most of his livestock and lease his pastures to neighboring ranchers when medical bills for Marcus's recovery consumed their modest savings. The old man never complained about the sacrifices, never made Marcus feel responsible for their reduced circumstances, but the guilt sat heavy in the boy's chest like a stone he couldn't dislodge. "Look what the wind blew in," sneered Jake Hoffman, a burly ranch hand whose family owned significant acreage on the outskirts of town. His voice carried the particular cruelty that came from someone who had never faced real adversity, never been forced to redefine himself after losing something fundamental to his identity. "What's a cripple gonna do with a horse? Ride it with his teeth?" His companions erupted in crude laughter, their faces flushed with the mean-spirited pleasure that bullies derived from targeting those they perceived as vulnerable. Marcus pressed forward without responding, his jaw set with quiet determination that had become his trademark response to cruelty. He had learned through painful experience that engaging with people like Jake only provided them with more ammunition, more opportunities to inflict emotional wounds that took longer to heal than physical injuries. Instead, he focused on the reason he had come here today, the desperate plan that had been forming in his mind for weeks as he watched his savings grow dollar by precious dollar. The auction ring centered the barn like a theatrical stage where dreams were bought and sold with the rhythmic chant of the auctioneer. Marcus found a spot along the metal railings, positioning himself where he could observe the proceedings while remaining relatively inconspicuous. His grandfather had taught him about horses during those golden summers before the accident, sharing wisdom accumulated over decades of working with these magnificent creatures. Those memories felt simultaneously distant and immediate, like looking at old photographs through water that distorted the images while somehow making them more precious. Harold Bradley had been a master at reading horses, understanding their moods and motivations with an intuition that seemed almost supernatural to his young grandson. He could approach the most skittish animal and within minutes have it eating from his hand, following him around the pasture like a devoted dog. "Horses are honest creatures," he would tell Marcus as they worked together in the barn. "They don't lie about their feelings or pretend to be something they're not. If you want to understand a horse, you have to be honest too. Show them who you really are, not who you think they want you to be." Those lessons had taken on new meaning after the accident, when Marcus struggled to figure out who he really was without the arm that had defined so much of his physical identity. He had been a natural athlete before the farming equipment malfunction that changed everything, excelling at baseball and football with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to think about his body's body sass. Limitations. Suddenly, simple tasks like tying his shoes or opening a jar became frustrating challenges that reminded him constantly of what he had lost. As the morning progressed, various horses paraded through the ring, each animal representing someone's aspirations or necessities. Marcus watched sleek quarter horses sell for thousands of dollars to wealthy buyers for neighboring counties, their coats gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights like polished mahogany. He observed workhorses traded between farmers who needed reliable partners for daily labor, their thick necks and broad backs promising years of faithful service pulling plows and hauling loads. He witnessed the casual dismissal of older animals whose value had diminished in the eyes of pragmatic buyers who calculated worth in terms of remaining productive years. The auctioneer was a thin man with a weathered face and a voice that could cut through the ambient noise like a skilled conductor directing a complex orchestra. His rapid-fire delivery hypnotized bidders into making decisions they might later regret, while his practiced eye missed nothing in the crowd. He could spot a hesitant bidder from 50 feet away, sense when someone was reaching their financial limit, and manipulate the energy in the room to extract maximum prices for his clients. Lot 36 brings us a fine example of quarter-horse breeding. The auctioneer called out as a muscular gelding entered the ring, his rider showing off the animal's smooth gaits and responsive nature. This boy's got papers going back 5 generations, trained for both ranch work and pleasure riding. Gentle enough for the family, but athletic enough for serious competition. We'll start the bidding at $1,500. The bidding escalated quickly. Wealthy ranchers and horse enthusiasts competing for an animal that represented the perfect combination of bloodlines, training, and temperament. Marcus watched the final price climb to $4,000, more than 10 times his entire savings, and felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. In this world of serious money and professional horsemen, he was clearly out of his league. Then she appeared, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat like a fishhook snaring something precious. The mare stumbled into the ring, her ribs visible beneath a coat that had once been beautiful chestnut, but now appeared dull and lifeless, as old leather left too long in the sun. Her head hung low between her shoulders, and each step seemed to require tremendous effort, as if she were walking through invisible quicksand that threatened to drag her down with every movement. The auctioneer's voice took on a perfunctory tone, the kind reserved for animals everyone knew were destined for unfortunate ends. Next up we have Lot 47, a 15-year-old thoroughbred mare. Papers available. But she's seen better days, folks. Previous owner reports she was a track performer in her younger years. Produced some decent foals before circumstances changed. We'll start the bidding at $50. $50 for this lady, who's got some good years left in her with the right care and attention. The crowd's attention wandered, conversations resuming about more promising lots scheduled for later in the day. A few hands raised half-heartedly, but Marcus could sense the lack of genuine interest radiating from the assembled buyers like heat from sun-baked asphalt. These people saw an old, sick horse, requiring expensive veterinary care and months of rehabilitation, with no guarantee of success. They calculated feed costs, boarding expenses, and the slim probability of return on investment with the cold efficiency of accountants reviewing a failing business. Marcus saw something entirely different when he looked at the struggling mare. Beneath the neglect and malnutrition, he recognized the noble bearing that spoke of Arabian bloodlines mixed with thoroughbred speed, the intelligent eyes that flickered with residual spirit despite obvious suffering. Her conformation suggested elegance and athleticism temporarily imprisoned by circumstances beyond her control, like a masterpiece hidden beneath layers of grime and damage. Most importantly, he recognized a kindred spirit, another being whom the world had written off as broken beyond repair. The mare's previous life was written in the scars on her legs, the hollow look in her eyes, and the way she flinched when the handler moved too quickly near her head. Someone had failed her badly, abandoning her to neglect that had nearly claimed her life. Marcus understood that kind of abandonment intimately, the feeling of being discarded when you no longer met other people's expectations or definitions of value. $60, he called out, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through fabric. Heads turned in his direction, expressions ranging from surprise to amusement. Several people nudged their neighbors and pointed, whispering comments about the disabled boy who thought he could handle a horse when he couldn't even handle his own physical limitations. The auctioneer paused, scanning the crowd to locate the bidder with the practiced efficiency of someone who had conducted thousands of similar transactions. When his eyes found Marcus, his expression softened slightly, perhaps recognizing something in the boy's face that reminded him of his own youth, his own desperate dreams and impractical hopes. $60 from the young man in the blue jacket. Do I hear 70? $70 for this thoroughbred mare with documented bloodlines and racing history? Silence stretched across the barn like a held breath, broken only by the shuffling of boots on concrete and the occasional cough from someone in the back rows. Marcus felt sweat forming on his palm, despite the cool morning air, his heart hammering against his ribs with the irregular rhythm of fear and anticipation. He understood that his bid might be the only thing standing between this horse and a fate too terrible to contemplate. The kind of ending that awaited animals who no longer had economic value in a world that measured worth primarily in dollars and productivity. Fair warning at $60, the auctioneer called, his gavel raised in preparation for the final decision. This mare needs someone willing to invest time and patience, but she's got good bones and a pedigree that speaks for itself. Going once at $60, going twice? The gavel's bang echoed with finality that sent shivers down Marcus's spine and seemed to reverberate through his entire body like a bell struck in a cathedral. He had just purchased a horse. The reality of his decision crashed over him like a wave breaking against rocky shores, bringing with it the full weight of responsibility and the terrifying recognition that he had committed himself to something far beyond his experience or resources. He owned a severely underweight thoroughbred mare with unknown health issues, no stable to house her, no pasture for grazing, and no trailer for transportation. His savings were nearly depleted. His experience with horse care was limited to childhood memories and theoretical knowledge, and he had no idea how he was going to manage the financial and logistical challenges that lay ahead. Yet something deep in his chest felt lighter than it had in months, as if making this impractical decision had somehow freed him from the cautious pessimism that had governed his choices since the accident. As the crowd's attention shifted to the next animal, a young paint horse with flashy markings and spirited behavior, Marcus approached the sale office to complete his transaction. The elderly clerk looked up from her paperwork with eyes that had processed thousands of similar exchanges over the decades, witnessing the full spectrum of human motivation from greed to compassion, practical necessity, to romantic foolishness. "First horse?" she asked kindly, recognizing the mixture of excitement and terror that marked novice buyers like a distinctive brand. Her voice carried the gentle authority of someone who had seen enough mistakes to offer guidance without judgment, understanding that everyone had to start somewhere in their journey with these magnificent and challenging animals. "Yes, ma'am. I need to arrange transportation and boarding. Do you know anyone who might help?" Marcus's voice betrayed his nervousness, the sudden realization that purchasing the horse had been only the first step in a process that would require resources and connections he didn't currently possess. She studied his earnest face, an empty sleeve, her expression softening with understanding that went deeper than mere sympathy. Something in his demeanor reminded her of her own son, who had overcome similar challenges to build a successful life, despite physical limitations that others had seen as insurmountable obstacles. "There's a fellow named Robert Chen who runs a small rescue operation about 10 miles north of here. He's got reasonable boarding rates and might be willing to work with you on transportation. Here's his number." Marcus accepted the slip of paper, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man, his fingers trembling slightly as he folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet next to the photograph of his parents that he carried everywhere. The simple act of receiving help from a stranger reminded him that not everyone in the world was cruel or indifferent, that kindness still existed for those brave enough to ask for it. Outside the auction barn, he found a quiet spot near his grandfather's truck and dialed the number with trembling fingers, rehearsing what he would say to this mysterious Robert Chen, who represented his only hope for making this impulsive purchase work. When a deep voice answered after 3 rings, Marcus explained his situation with the desperate honesty of someone who had committed to a course of action without fully considering the consequences. $60 for a sick thoroughbred? Son, you either got more heart than sense, or you see something the rest of us missed. Either way, I respect that. What's your name and how old are you? Marcus Bradley, sir. I'm 16. I know I probably should have thought this through better, but when I saw her in that ring, I just couldn't let her go too. He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the fate that awaited unwanted horses at livestock auctions. I understand, Marcus. Been there myself, more times than I care to count. Bring her over this afternoon and we'll figure out arrangements. Fair warning, though, Rehabilitating a neglected horse is expensive and time-consuming work. You sure you're ready for that kind of commitment? Marcus looked back toward the auction barn, where his newly purchased mare waited in a holding pen, with other animals destined for transport to their new homes. Even from a distance, he could see her standing apart from the others, her head still hanging low with the defeated posture that had first captured his attention. "I'm sure, sir, she deserves a chance." The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, financial transactions, and logistical coordination that felt simultaneously overwhelming and exhilarating. Marcus called his grandfather to explain the situation, expecting anger or disappointment but receiving instead the quiet pride that Harold Bradley reserved for moments when his grandson showed the kind of character that couldn't be taught in schools or learned from books. "Sounds like you found yourself a project, boy. Your grandmother would have liked that horse. Probably would have done the same thing you did. She never could resist an underdog." Harold's voice carried the warmth of memories shared across generations, connecting Marcus to a family legacy of compassion that predated his birth. Robert Chen arrived with a stock trailer that had seen better decades, but appeared mechanically sound, its dented sides and faded paint telling stories of countless trips transporting animals to new homes in Second Bois. Chances. Chen himself was a compact man in his 50s, with calloused hands and the kind of patient demeanor that came from years of working with traumatized horses. His own story, Marcus would later learn, included a successful construction business that funded his rescue operation and a childhood spent helping his immigrant parents establish themselves in a community that hadn't always been welcoming to outsiders. Together, they coaxed the frightened mare up the ramp into the trailer, her hooves echoing hollow against metal flooring that resonated like a drum with each hesitant step. She loaded with surprising cooperation, as if she understood that these strangers represented her only chance for survival, her last opportunity to experience kindness before the world gave up on her. Completely. During the 20-minute drive to Chen's facility, Marcus learned about his new partner through the patient questioning of someone who had rescued dozens of similar cases over the years. Her registered name was Arabian Sunset, though her previous owner had called her Sunny during her racing career and brief stint as a broodmare. She had been moderately successful on regional tracks, earning enough prize money to pay for her training and care, while providing excitement for the small syndicate that had owned her racing career. When her speed began to decline with age, Sunny had been retired to breeding duties on a farm that specialized in producing sport horses for the amateur market. For several years, she had produced healthy foals that inherited her athletic ability and gentle temperament, contributing to bloodlines that would influence generations of horses yet to be born. Her life had purpose and value, surrounded by competent care and genuine affection from people who understood her worth beyond mere economic calculation. Then the economy shifted, horse prices dropped, and the farm's owner encountered the kind of financial difficulties that forced impossible choices between personal survival and animal welfare. Sunny had been sold to a dealer who promised good homes for his animals, but delivered something entirely different. A man who saw horses as commodities to be stored as cheaply as possible until market conditions improved or other opportunities presented themselves. The dealer's facility had been a nightmare of overcrowding, inadequate nutrition, and medical neglect that transformed healthy animals into the kind of desperate cases that ended up at livestock auctions. Sunny had spent 8 months in conditions that would have been considered criminal if applied to dogs or cats, her physical condition deteriorating as her spirit slowly died under the weight of abandonment and neglect. Chen's rescue operation occupied 40 acres of rolling pasture, dotted with mature oak trees that provided natural shelter from summer heat and winter storms. The property had once been a working cattle ranch, its fencing and water systems maintained by Chen's construction crews during slow periods in the building trade. A modest barn housed a dozen stalls, most occupied by horses recovering from various forms of neglect or abuse. Their rehabilitation funded by Chen's business profits and supplemented by modest boarding fees from horse owners who valued his expertise over fancy amenities. As they unloaded Sunny into a spacious stall bedded with fresh straw that smelled like summer meadows and honest work, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling around his shoulders like a heavy coat. The mare immediately headed for the water bucket. drinking with the desperate thirst of someone who had been denied adequate hydration for too long. Her throat working rhythmically as she consumed nearly 2 gallons before finally lifting her head to survey her new surroundings. Her ribs showed prominently beneath her rough coat, and her hip bones protruded at sharp angles that spoke of prolonged malnutrition and the body's desperate attempts to survive by consuming its own muscle tissue. Her mane was tangled with burrs and debris, her tail thin and brittle from poor nutrition and lack of care. Yet her eyes retained a spark of intelligence that suggested the spirit inside had not been completely extinguished by months of neglect. "She's probably 800 pounds underweight," Chen observed, running experienced hands along her neck and shoulders with the gentle efficiency of someone who had evaluated hundreds of similar cases. Good bone structure underneath all this neglect, though. Strong heart, clear lungs, no obvious lameness issues that won't resolve with proper care. With adequate nutrition and veterinary attention, she could make a complete recovery. Question is, do you have the patience and resources for a project this big? Marcus looked into Sunny's dark eyes, seeing intelligence and cautious hope that humbled him completely. She was giving him the same chance he was giving her, trusting that this new human might be different from the ones who had failed her so badly. "I'll find a way. She deserves a chance." Chen nodded approvingly, recognizing something in the boy's voice that reminded him of his own younger self. The determined idealism that had driven him to rescue his first neglected horse, despite warnings from friends and family about the financial and emotional costs of such endeavors. "Fair enough. Boarding's $200 a month. Includes hay and basic care. You'll need to cover veterinary expenses and any special feed supplements she requires. Dr. Sarah Williams comes out here twice a week. She's reasonable with her rates, and good with rescue cases." That evening, Marcus called his grandfather to provide a detailed report of the day's events, his voice alternating between excitement and anxiety as he described the mare's condition and the challenges that lay ahead. Harold Bradley listened without interruption, offering the kind of patient attention that had made him Marcus's primary source of support and guidance since his parents' death. "Sounds like you found yourself a project, boy. Question is, what do you plan to do with her once she's healthy? Horse like that, with her bloodlines and training, she's got potential for more than just being a pasture pet." Marcus realized he hadn't thought beyond the immediate goal of saving Sunny's life, hadn't considered what would happen after the rehabilitation process was complete. "I don't know, Grandpa. I just knew I couldn't let her die." Sometimes, that's enough reason to start. The rest will come to you when you're ready. Your grandmother always said that the right horse finds the right person at exactly the right time, even when neither one of them realizes it at first. Over the following weeks, Marcus established a routine that revolved entirely around Sunny's care and recovery. His days structured around her needs and progress with the single-minded focus of someone who had found genuine purpose for the first time since his accident. Every morning before school, he rode his bicycle, the 8 miles to Chen's facility, arriving as dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded him of better times when the world had seemed full of endless possibilities. The bicycle ride itself became a form of meditation, his legs pumping steadily along country roads that wound through farmland and pastures where other horses grazed peacefully in the growing light. He learned to navigate the route in all weather conditions, his determination to reach Sunny overcoming his natural reluctance to venture out in rain or cold that made the journey more challenging for someone with limited physical abilities. He would clean her stall with methodical care, removing soiled bedding and replacing it with fresh straw that crackled under his feet like a fire made of golden stems. He checked her water bucket, refilled her hay net, and spent precious minutes simply being present with her, allowing trust to develop between them through patient consistency that asked nothing more than acceptance of his presence. After school, he returned for evening chores, often staying until well past dark to groom her improving coat with brushes that Chen had provided from his extensive collection of horse care equipment. The grooming sessions became their primary bonding time, Marcus working carefully around sensitive areas where Sunny's skin showed evidence of past neglect, while she gradually learned to enjoy the attention and physical contact that had once frightened her. Chen proved to be an invaluable mentor. sharing decades of experience in horse handling and training with the generous patience of someone who understood that knowledge gained through trial and error was more valuable than information learned from books or videos. Under his guidance, Marcus learned to read Sunny's body language, to recognize the subtle signs of discomfort or anxiety that preceded more obvious behavioral changes, and to respond appropriately to her needs and moods with timing that could make the difference between progress and setback. Horses are prey animals, Chen explained during one of their evening conversations as they watched Sunny graze in the small paddock adjacent to her stall. Their survival has always depended on reading the intentions of predators and other horses, so they're incredibly sensitive to body language, energy levels, and emotional states. If you want to communicate with a horse, you have to be aware of what you're broadcasting with your posture, your breathing, your level of breath, tension, or relaxation. Dr. Williams conducted a thorough examination during her first visit, her experienced hands exploring every inch of Sunny's body, while her trained eye cataloged the various health issues that months of neglect had created. The veterinary report read like an inventory of suffering. Intestinal parasites that had compromised her digestive system, dental problems that made eating painful and inefficient, chronic dehydration that had stressed her kidneys, and muscle atrophy that would require months of carefully managed exercise to correct. The veterinary bills mounted quickly, each treatment and medication representing a significant portion of Marcus's limited resources. He took additional hours at Peterson's Hardware, working weekends and evenings to earn money that immediately disappeared into Sunny's care. When his savings were completely exhausted, he made the painful decision to sell his beloved dirt bike, the one possession that had provided him with a sense of freedom and independence since the accident. Mr. Peterson, understanding the situation without needing detailed explanations, quietly increased Marcus's hourly wage and found additional tasks that justified the extra compensation. The old hardware store owner had witnessed Marcus's dedication to the horse through their daily conversations, recognizing the positive changes in the boy's attitude and self-confidence that made the job adjustment seem like a wise investment in human potential rather than simple charity. Each sacrifice felt worthwhile when Marcus saw incremental improvements in Sunny's condition and demeanor. Her ribs became less prominent as proper nutrition began to restore healthy weight. Her coat developed the beginning of a shine that hinted at its former glory. Her eyes brightened with intelligence and curiosity that had been dulled by months of depression and despair. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and there were setbacks that tested Marcus's resolve and challenged his belief that his impulsive purchase had been the right decision. For the first month, Sunny remained lethargic and uninterested in human interaction beyond accepting food and basic care. She would stand motionless in her stall for hours, her head hanging low with the defeated posture that had become her default response to a world that had repeatedly disappointed her expectations. Gradually, however, she began to show curiosity about Marcus's presence, her ears pricking forward when she heard his bicycle approaching on the gravel road that led to the barn. She started nickering softly when he appeared in the barn aisle, a quiet vocalization that suggested she was beginning to associate his arrival with positive experiences rather than merely enduring another human who might or might not prove trustworthy. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday morning in late October when Marcus arrived to find Sunny standing at the front of her stall, her head extended over the door as if she had been waiting for his arrival. When he approached, she nuzzled his shoulder gently, the first voluntary physical contact she had initiated since arriving at the rescue facility. The gesture was simple but profoundly meaningful, representing the moment when trust began to replace fear in their developing relationship. From that day forward, their bond deepened with each interaction. Sunny began to follow Marcus around her paddock, walking close enough that he could feel her warm breath on his neck as they moved together through the daily routines of care and companionship. She learned to enjoy being groomed, her eyes half closing with pleasure as Marcus worked through her mane with patient strokes that untangled months of neglect, while massaging muscles that were finally beginning to develop healthy boss tone. As winter settled over the county with its characteristic mixture of harsh weather and enforced patience, Sunny's condition improved dramatically. Her ribs no longer showed prominently beneath skin that had begun to develop the smooth covering of healthy muscle and fat. Her coat grew thick and lustrous, developing the deep chestnut color that photographs from her racing days had promised, but malnutrition had temporarily stolen. Her eyes regained the bright alertness that marked a horse in good health, reflecting an intelligence and curiosity that months of depression had obscured. More importantly, she began to demonstrate the athletic potential that Marcus had recognized at the auction beneath layers of neglect and despair. Her movement became fluid and powerful, suggesting reserves of speed and agility that proper conditioning could unlock and develop. When she played in the paddock during cold mornings that energized her improving spirit, Marcus caught glimpses of the racehorse she had once been. The athlete whose speed and heart had earned modest purses and the admiration of trainers who understood quality when they saw it. During Christmas break, Marcus spent entire days at the rescue facility, working with Sunny on ground exercises that built trust and communication between them, while developing the physical fitness that would support more demanding activities. Chen taught him the fundamentals of natural horsemanship, emphasizing partnership over domination, understanding over force, patience over quick results that might compromise long-term progress. These lessons resonated deeply with Marcus, who had learned similar principles about overcoming adversity through his own rehabilitation process after the accident. Physical therapy had taught him that healing required patience and consistency, that setbacks were part of progress rather than signs of failure, and that the most meaningful achievements often came through small daily improvements rather than dramatic breakthroughs. She's starting to remember who she used to be. Chen observed one afternoon as they watched Sunny gallop across the pasture with fluid grace that took their breath away and reminded them both why horses had captured human imagination for thousands of years. Question is, what do you want her to become? That evening, Marcus discovered his answer in an unexpected place while completing a school research project about overcoming challenges. While browsing online resources about adaptive sports and disability advocacy, he stumbled across videos of Liberty horse performances where riders worked with their horses without saddles, bridles, or any physical restraints beyond mutual trust and communication, developed through months of patient training and relationship building. The performances looked like conversations between partners who understood each other at a level deeper than words, their movements synchronized with a precision that suggested telepathic communication rather than craft. Traditional training methods. Horses galloped in perfect circles around their handlers, changed gaits on subtle cues, reared and pivoted and danced with athletic grace that celebrated the natural beauty and power of these magnificent animals. One video particularly captivated his attention and seemed to speak directly to possibilities he had never considered for himself and Sunny. It featured a young woman with cerebral palsy who had trained her rescue horse to perform an intricate routine set to music that told the story of their partnership. The performance was breathtaking, not because of its technical perfection, but because of the obvious love and understanding between horse and rider. The way they moved together as if they were two parts of a single entity expressing joy through movement and music. Comments below the video praised their courage, dedication, and the inspirational message that limitations existed only in people's minds. That true partnership could transcend individual weaknesses to create something more beautiful and powerful than either participant could achieve alone. Viewers from around the world shared their own stories of overcoming challenges, finding hope in the example of someone who had refused to let physical limitations define the boundaries of possibility. Marcus watched the video repeatedly, something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt since before the accident changed his perception of what he could accomplish in a world that seemed designed for people with 2 arms and unlimited physical capabilities. For 2 years, he had defined himself by what he couldn't do, by the activities and dreams that seemed impossible with only 1 arm, and the constant awareness of being different from everyone around him. This performance suggested possibilities he had never considered, goals that might be achievable through different methods and perspectives, rather than simply scaled-down versions of conventional approaches. The young woman in the video had found a way to excel, not despite her disability, but by finding an activity that valued trust, patience, and communication over physical strength or traditional athletic abilities. The annual Henderson County Fair was still 8 months away, but Marcus began to envision himself and Sunny performing for an audience that would see their partnership rather than their individual limitations. The more he thought about it, the more the idea consumed his imagination and provided a focus for their daily training sessions that went beyond simple rehabilitation towards something approaching artistry. They could prove that broken things could be made beautiful again, that second chances were worth fighting for, that courage came in many different forms and didn't always look like what people expected. Their story could inspire others facing similar challenges, demonstrating that the most unlikely partnerships sometimes produced the most extraordinary results. When he shared his vision with Chen, the older man was initially skeptical about the ambitious timeline and the complexity of what Marcus was proposing. Liberty work requires years of training, son. It's not something you can rush. Especially with a rescue horse, who's still learning to trust humans again. The kind of performance you're talking about demands a level of communication and partnership that most professional trainers never achieve with their horses. We have 8 months, Marcus replied with quiet determination that reminded Chen of his own younger self when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. If we're not ready by then, we won't perform. But I think we can do this. I think she wants to do this. Chen studied the boy's face, recognizing the same stubborn resolve that had driven him to bid on a dying horse at an auction where everyone else saw only failure and financial liability. There was something in Marcus's eyes that suggested this goal was more than simple ambition, that it represented a necessary step in his journey toward accepting himself and his capabilities, rather than focusing on his limitations. All right, we'll try, but you need to understand that this kind of training requires absolute consistency. No shortcuts, no excuses, no giving up when things get difficult or progress seems slower than you'd like. Liberty work is built on trust, and trust takes time to develop properly. Marcus nodded solemnly, understanding that he was committing himself to something that would demand every ounce of dedication and perseverance he possessed. I understand. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility that seemed to energize both Marcus and Sonny as they began the intensive training program that would either prepare them for their ambitious goal or teach them valuable lessons about the difference between dreams and realistic expectations. Their training sessions became more structured and ambitious, as Chen introduced increasingly complex exercises designed to develop their communication and partnership beyond the basic trust-building work they had accomplished during the winter months. They worked on Liberty leading, where Sonny learned to follow Marcus's movements without any physical connection between them, responding to subtle changes in his body language and energy level with precision that seemed almost mystical to outside observers. They practiced backing, turning, and changing gaits based solely on vocal cues and hand signals that Marcus developed specifically for their unique partnership. The progress was often frustratingly slow, marked by breakthroughs that were followed by inexplicable setbacks that tested Marcus's patience and challenged his belief that they could achieve their ambitious goal. Some days, Sonny seemed to forget everything they had worked on, responding to Marcus's requests with confusion or disinterest that reminded him how much they still needed to accomplish. Other days, she appeared distracted by weather, other horses, or simply the desire to graze, rather than work on exercises that demanded concentration and effort. Marcus learned that patience was not just a virtue in horse training, it was an absolute necessity for anyone hoping to develop the kind of partnership that could produce extraordinary results. Forcing progress or becoming frustrated with setbacks only created tension that undermined the trust they had worked so hard to build, setting back their training by days or weeks while they rebuilt the emotional connection that made communication possible. Chen proved to be a demanding but fair teacher, pushing Marcus to develop skills he didn't know he possessed while constantly emphasizing safety and respect for the horse as principles that could never be compromised for the sake of progress or ambitious goals. She's not a machine, he would remind Marcus when frustration began to show in his voice or body language. She's a living, thinking creature with her own opinions and moods. Your job is to make working with you the most interesting and rewarding thing in her day. These lessons extended far beyond horse training, teaching Marcus valuable principles about leadership, communication, and partnership that would serve him well in every aspect of his life. He learned that true authority came from earning respect rather than demanding obedience, that the most effective communication often happened without words, and that the best partnerships were built on mutual benefit, rather than one-sided control. By early summer, their partnership had evolved into something that impressed even Chen's experienced eye, and drew curious visitors from throughout the region who had heard rumors about the unusual training program taking place at the small rescue facility. Sonny would mirror Marcus's movements with fluid precision that seemed almost telepathic, cantering in perfect circles around him as he stood motionless in the center, changing directions with subtle shifts in his posture, stopping and starting based on barely perceptible changes in his energy and focus. Their connection transcended the physical limitations that had once seemed insurmountable, proving that communication between species could happen at levels that had nothing to do with conventional methods or traditional approaches to horse training. Marcus discovered that his missing arm was irrelevant to their partnership, that horses responded to intention and energy rather than physical completeness or conformity to normal expectations. Word of their unusual training partnership began to spread through the tight-knit community of local horse enthusiasts, like ripples expanding across a still pond after a stone breaks the surface. People would drive out to Chen's facility specifically to watch the one-armed boy and his rescued thoroughbred work together with a harmony that seemed almost mystical, their movements synchronized with precision that suggested years of partnership rather than months of patient development. Some visitors came out of curiosity, drawn by stories that seemed too remarkable to be entirely true. Others arrived with skepticism, expecting to witness an amateur attempting something beyond his capabilities with a horse that couldn't possibly perform at the level the rumors suggested. Most left with a sense of having witnessed something genuinely special, something that challenged their assumptions about what was possible when dedication met opportunity under the right circumstances. Jake Hoffman and his friends made several unwelcome appearances during this period, their ridicule becoming more pointed and personal as Marcus and Sonny's abilities became more evident and harder to dismiss as beginner's luck or exaggerated storytelling. "Still looks like a freak show to me," Jake sneered during one particularly memorable visit, his voice carrying the bitter edge of someone who resented others' success because it highlighted his own lack of accomplishment. Dancing around with a broken-down nag won't change the fact that you're half a person trying to do a whole person's job. Marcus had learned not to respond to such provocations, understanding that engaging with bullies only provided them with the attention they craved and the emotional reactions that fueled their cruel behavior. Instead, he continued working with Sonny, allowing their partnership to speak for itself while refusing to dignify ignorance with anger or defensive explanations. Chen, however, stepped forward with quiet authority that commanded respect even from someone as aggressively hostile as Jake. "I think you fellows have seen enough for today. Time to move along before you wear out whatever welcome you might have had." The confrontation served as a reminder that not everyone would appreciate or understand what Marcus and Sonny were accomplishing together. That success often attracted criticism from people who felt threatened by others' achievements or needed to diminish extraordinary accomplishments to protect their own fragile sense of self-worth. As July melted into August with the relentless heat that characterized summer in their region, Marcus's focus intensified with laser-like precision that excluded everything except preparation for their upcoming casa. Performance. He spent every available moment at the rescue facility, refining their routine, polishing transitions between movements, and building the stamina necessary for a sustained performance that would showcase their partnership at its absolute best. Sonny seemed to sense the approaching culmination of their months of training, her enthusiasm and cooperation reaching new levels of excellence that suggested she understood the importance of what they were working toward. Her physical condition had reached a peak that exceeded even Chen's optimistic predictions, her muscle tone and cardiovascular fitness reflecting months of carefully managed exercise and optimal nutrition. The routine they developed told a story of transformation and hope that began with despair and culminated in triumph, using movement and music to communicate emotions and experiences that transcended words. It opened with Sonny standing alone in the center of the arena, her head hanging low in the same defeated posture she had displayed at the auction, her entire body language conveying the abandonment and hopelessness that had nearly claimed her life. Marcus would enter from the opposite side of the arena, approaching slowly with outstretched hand, in a gesture that represented the moment when trust first began to develop between them. when two broken beings recognized something in each other that offered the possibility of healing and renewal. As carefully selected music began to swell from quiet beginnings to more complex harmonies, their interaction became more dynamic and joyful, each movement building on the previous one to create a narrative of recovery and partnership. The climax of their routine featured Sonny galloping in intricate patterns around Marcus as he stood proudly in the center. Both of them transformed by their partnership from the damaged beings they had been into something greater than the sum of their individual parts. The choreography celebrated not just their personal journey, but the universal themes of second chances, the power of patience and persistence, and the extraordinary things that could happen when someone refused to give up on a seemingly hopeless situation. Shen helped them select music that enhanced the emotional impact of their performance while providing the rhythmic structure necessary for precise timing of their movements. They chose a piece that began quietly and melancholy, building gradually through several movements to a triumphant crescendo that perfectly matched the arc of their story and provided emotional peaks that would engage audiences on multiple levels. During practice sessions, Marcus found himself moved to tears by the power of what they had created together, the way their routine transformed personal struggle into universal inspiration. Watching Sonny move with such grace and power, remembering where she had started and seeing where their partnership had brought her, filled him with a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond personal achievement to touch something deeper about the nature of healing and hope. 3 weeks before the fair, Dr. Williams conducted a final health evaluation that confirmed what everyone could see with their eyes but needed professional verification to believe completely. Sonny had not only recovered fully from her previous neglect, she was in the best physical condition of her life, her weight perfect, her coat gleaming like polished copper, and her muscle tone reflecting months of consistent exercise and optimal nutrition. "She's a completely different horse from the one you brought here," Dr. Williams observed with the professional satisfaction that came from witnessing successful treatment of a case that had initially seemed hopeless. "Her blood work is perfect, her heart and lungs are strong, and her overall condition would be impressive for a horse half her age. Whatever you've been doing with her, keep it up." The veterinarian's words provided official confirmation of what Marcus's heart had known for months, that their partnership had accomplished something truly remarkable that went beyond simple rehabilitation to approach genuine transformation. Sonny wasn't just healthy, she was thriving in ways that suggested she had found her true purpose in life through their partnership. As the final weeks of preparation passed with increasing intensity, Marcus felt a curious mixture of excitement and serenity that surprised him with its depth and complexity. They had prepared as thoroughly as possible. Their routine was polished to perfection, and their partnership had reached a level of understanding that transcended normal horse and handler relationships to approach something that could only be described as magical. The Henderson County Fair arrived with the usual fanfare of carnival rides, food vendors, and agricultural competitions that had been traditions for over 70 years, drawing families from throughout the region for a celebration of rural life and community values that connected generations through shared experiences and common memories. The horse show was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, featuring classes for everything from draft horse pulling contests to elaborate Western pleasure competitions that showcased the finest animals and most skilled riders in several counties. Marcus had entered the open exhibition class, a category that welcomed unconventional performances and unusual partnerships while providing opportunities for demonstrations that didn't fit traditional competitive categories. The class had originally been created to accommodate visiting professionals who wanted to showcase new training methods or promote their services. But over the years it had evolved into a platform for community members to share special talents or unique partnerships with appreciative audiences. As he loaded Sonny into Chen's trailer that morning, Marcus felt the weight of months of preparation settling around him like a familiar coat, comfortable and reassuring despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. They had worked toward this moment with single-minded dedication that had consumed every available hour and transformed both of their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. The fairgrounds buzzed with activity as families enjoyed the last weekend of summer vacation. Children clutching cotton candy and stuffed animals won at carnival games, while their parents sampled local food vendors and caught up of neighbors they might not see again until next year's fair. The horse show arena was located in a quieter section of the grounds, but news of the unusual exhibition had spread through social media and word of mouth, drawing a larger crowd than usual for an event that typically attracted mainly horse enthusiasts and agricultural families. Marcus arrived at the staging area behind the arena to find Chen waiting with Sunny already groomed and ready for their performance. Her coat brushed to perfection, and her mane braided with simple elegance that enhanced her natural beauty without distracting from the power of their story. The mare seemed calm but alert, her ears pricked forward with interest at the unfamiliar sights and sounds of the fair, her behavior suggesting confidence rather than anxiety about the performance ahead. Other competitors were warming up their horses in the practice ring, their elaborate western outfits and polished tack creating an atmosphere of serious competition that might have intimidated someone less prepared or breeder, confident in their abilities. Marcus watched elaborate reining demonstrations and precision trail classes that showcased thousands of dollars worth of training and equipment, momentarily wondering if their simple story of partnership and recovery would seem amateurish by comparison. "You ready for this?" Chen asked quietly, his weathered face showing traces of nervousness that he was trying to hide for Marcus's benefit. Despite his decades of experience with horses and his confidence in their preparation, he understood that public performance added variables that couldn't be controlled or predicted through practice sessions. Marcus nodded, surprised by his own composure and the sense of certainty that had replaced the anxiety he had expected to feel at this crucial moment. "We're ready." As they waited for their turn, Marcus noticed familiar faces beginning to fill the bleachers surrounding the arena, a gathering of supporters that represented the community that had formed around their story over the past months. His grandfather sat in the front row, his expression proud but anxious, his weathered hands clasped together as if in prayer for their success. Mr. Peterson had closed his hardware store early to attend, bringing several customers who had heard about Marcus's project through their daily conversations and wanted to witness the culmination of months of yen, dedication, and hard work. Dr. Williams sat with other local veterinarians who had come to witness the results of their colleagues' patient treatment of what had initially seemed like a hopeless case. The rescue community was well represented, with volunteers and supporters from several facilities who understood the significance of what Marcus and Sunny represented for their cause. Their success would demonstrate the potential that existed in seemingly hopeless cases, providing inspiration and practical examples for future rescue efforts while honoring the work that dedicated individuals were doing throughout the region. Jake Hoffman and his crew occupied a section near the back, their presence a reminder that not everyone was hoping for success, that some people preferred to see others fail rather than question their own assumptions about what was possible with determination and proper support. Marcus could see them pointing and laughing, no doubt making crude jokes about the upcoming performance and preparing to enjoy what they hoped would be public humiliation. Their hostility no longer bothered Marcus the way it once had, their opinions having lost power over his self-image, as he discovered sources of validation that came from within, rather than from external approval or acceptance. He had found something more meaningful than their respect, something that couldn't be diminished by ridicule or enhanced by praise from people who didn't understand the true nature of what he and Sunny had accomplished together. The announcer's voice crackled over the sound system as the previous competitor finished his reining demonstration to polite quote. Applause from an audience that appreciated technical skill even when it wasn't accompanied by emotional connection or inspiring story. Next up in our open exhibition class, we have Marcus Bradley and Arabian Sunset performing an original Liberty routine. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special performance featuring a young man and his rescued thoroughbred mare who have been working together for the past year in what can only be described as a true partnership. Marcus led Sunny into the arena, her hooves echoing against the packed dirt as they made their way to the center of the performance area, the sound seeming amplified by the sudden silence that fell over the crowd as conversations trailed off and attention focused on the unlikely pair. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching them, some curious, some skeptical, some genuinely hopeful for their success, all of them waiting to see if the rumors and stories they had heard could possibly be true. The arena felt larger than it had during their practice sessions. the audience creating an energy and expectation that added complexity to what had become routine through months of repetition and refinement. Marcus took a moment to center himself, remembering Chen's teachings about the importance of calm confidence and clear intention in communicating with horses, especially in stressful or unfamiliar situations. He removed Sunny's halter, leaving her completely free in the arena with no physical restraints or connections between them, the ultimate demonstration of trust and partnership that represented the culmination of KAF. Everything they had worked toward. For a moment, they stood together in the center of the space, Marcus's left hand resting gently on her neck as he whispered words of encouragement and reassurance that only she could hear. Then he stepped back, took his position at the designated starting point, and nodded to Chen, who was positioned at the sound booth with their carefully selected music ready to begin. The moment had arrived for them to share their story with an audience that would either understand and appreciate what they had accomplished together, or dismiss it as an interesting novelty without recognizing its deeper significance. The opening notes drifted across the arena, soft and melancholy, as Sunny adopted the dejected posture they had practiced hundreds of times, her head dropping low, and her entire body language conveying the despair and abandonment she had felt at the auction so many months ago, when the world had written her off as worthless. Marcus stood motionless at the far end of the arena, representing the distance that exists between broken things and the people who might be willing to help heal them. The audience fell completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something different from the technical demonstrations they had seen earlier. Something that touched emotions and told stories that went beyond simple entertainment or competitive achievement. Even the children stopped their fidgeting and focused their attention on the arena, responding instinctively to the power of the narrative that was beginning to unfold before them. As the music began to build from its quiet beginning toward more complex harmonies, Marcus started walking slowly toward Sunny, his steps measured and deliberate. Each movement choreographed to represent the patience and persistence required to build trust with a traumatized being who had every reason to expect disappointment and abandonment from humans. Sunny remained motionless until he drew near, then lifted her head slightly, as if noticing his presence for the first time, and daring to hope that this human might be different from the ones who had failed her so badly. The audience watched in fascination as this simple interaction played out, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing the beginning of something beautiful and meaningful. What followed was 8 minutes of the most graceful, moving performance the Henderson County Fair had ever seen, a demonstration of partnership and trust that transcended species barriers and spoke to universal themes of healing, hope, and the transformative power of refusing to give up on seemingly hopeless situations. Sunny responded to Marcus's subtle cues with precision that seemed almost telepathic, cantering in perfect circles around him while he stood motionless in the center, changing directions with fluid grace based on barely perceptible shifts in his posture and energy, stopping and starting in response to vocal commands that carried emotional undertones more than specific words. Marcus moved through their choreography with quiet confidence that had been earned through months of patient work and gradual trust building, his empty sleeve no longer a source of limitation or self-consciousness, but simply part of who he was, irrelevant to his ability to communicate with and inspire this magnificent animal who would become his partner in ways that went far beyond traditional horse and handler relationships. The routine built toward its climax as the music swelled to its triumphant crescendo, Sunny galloping in a wide circle around the entire arena, with her stride long and powerful, her neck arched with pride and joy that reflected her complete transformation from the broken animal she had been into the confident, healthy horse she had become through their partnership. Marcus stood in the center, turning slowly to follow her movement, his face radiant with the kind of happiness that comes from achieving something truly meaningful, something that goes beyond personal accomplishment to touch the lives of others and demonstrate principles that extend far beyond the immediate situation. As the final notes faded, Sunny came to a perfect stop directly in front of him, lowering her head so he could place his hand on her forehead in a gesture of mutual respect and affection that brought their story full circle. From the moment when he had first approached her in the auction ring to this triumphant demonstration of what they had accomplished together. The silence that followed, seemed to stretch for eternity, broken only by the sound of Marcus's own heartbeat and Sonny's quiet breathing as they stood together in the center of the arena. Both of them transformed by their journey from the damaged beings they had been into something greater than the sum of their individual parts. Marcus wondered if he had somehow misjudged their performance, if what felt magical and meaningful to him had appeared amateurish or boring to an audience that might have expected more traditional demonstrations of horsemanship or athletic achievement. The quiet stretched on until he began to fear that their story had failed to communicate its intended message, that months of preparation had culminated in public disappointment. Then someone in the front row began to clap, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm that broke the spell of silence and released the emotional energy that had been building throughout their performance. The applause spread through the bleachers like wildfire, building to a thunderous ovation that continued for several minutes while people rose to their feet in recognition of something they had witnessed that went far beyond entertainment to approach genuine inspiration. Marcus looked up through tears that he hadn't realized were streaming down his face to see people wiping their own eyes, including several tough ranchers who rarely showed emotion in public, but had been moved by the power of what they had just witnessed. His grandfather was openly weeping, his weathered hands clasped together as if in thanksgiving for a blessing he had hardly dared to hope for. Even some of Jake Hoffman's companions appeared moved by the performance, their usual cynicism temporarily replaced by recognition that they had witnessed something genuinely special, though Jake himself sat with arms crossed, his expression stubbornly unchanged by evidence that contradicted his preconceptions about what the disabled boy and his rescued horse could accomplish together. As Marcus led Sonny from the arena, they were surrounded by well-wishers, offering congratulations and praise that went far beyond polite appreciation to approach genuine awe at what they had accomplished. Children pressed forward to pet Sonny's neck, their parents thanking Marcus for showing them something beautiful and inspiring that would become a treasured memory for years to come. Local newspaper reporters approached with requests for interviews, wanting to share their story with readers who hadn't been fortunate enough to witness the performance in person but would find inspiration in the account of what determination and compassion could accomplish when properly applied to seemingly hopeless situations. Television crews from regional stations had arrived after hearing about the unusual performance through social media posts that had begun circulating even before they finished their routine, their cameras capturing reactions from audience members who struggled to find words adequate to describe what they had just experienced. Shen appeared at Marcus's side, his usually reserved demeanor cracked by obvious pride and emotion that he made no attempt to hide or minimize. "I've been around horses for 40 years, he said quietly, his voice thick with feeling, "and I've never seen anything like what you two just did out there. That wasn't just a performance, it was pure magic, the kind of thing that reminds people why they fell in love with horses in the first place." And Dr. Williams pushed through the crowd to examine Sonny, her professional interest in the mare's condition competing with her emotional response to the performance they had just witnessed. "She's not even breathing hard," she observed with amazement. "That level of performance with that kind of emotional intensity, and she's as calm as if she'd been grazing in a pasture. You've created something truly special here." The awards ceremony that followed felt almost anticlimactic after the emotional intensity of their performance, though Marcus accepted the blue ribbon and small cash prize with appropriate gratitude for recognition that validated months of hard work and dedication. More meaningful were the personal connections made with audience members who approached throughout the remainder of the afternoon to share their own stories of overcoming challenges and finding hope in his example. Later that evening, as Marcus groomed Sonny in her stall at the rescue facility, while the events of the day replayed in his mind, like scenes from a dream that had somehow become reality, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of triumph and recognition. 18 months ago, he had been a bitter, angry boy, defined by his limitations, and consumed by resentment toward a world that seemed determined to remind him constantly of everything he couldn't do. Today, he was a young man who had discovered that the most meaningful accomplishments often came not from perfection or conformity to normal expectations, but from the courage to try despite imperfect circumstances, to see potential where others saw only problems, and to persist through difficulties that would have defeated someone with less determination or support. Sunny nudged his shoulder gently, as if sensing his thoughts and offering her own form of comfort and companionship that had become as essential to his well-being as food or shelter. She had taught him that healing was possible for even the most damaged beings, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal. That partnership could transcend individual weaknesses to create something stronger and more beautiful than either participant could achieve alone. Word of their performance spread far beyond Henderson County through social media videos and local news coverage that captured the attention of horse enthusiasts and disability advocates throughout the region. End quote. Beyond, Marcus received calls from professional horse trainers, offering opportunities to work with other rescued animals or to develop his skills with professionally trained horses that could provide new challenges and learning experiences. A documentary filmmaker contacted him about featuring their story in a project about unlikely partnerships and second chances, recognizing the universal appeal of their journey from despair to triumph. Publishing companies inquired about book rights, seeing commercial potential in a story that combined animal rescue, disability advocacy, and inspirational achievement in ways that would appeal to multiple audiences. Most importantly, their success inspired other people facing their own challenges to reconsider what might be possible with determination, patience, and the right kind of support. Marcus began receiving letters from children with disabilities, elderly people dealing with health problems, and adults struggling with various forms of adversity who found hope and encouragement in his example. A young girl with spina bifida wrote to describe how watching videos of their performance had convinced her to try horseback riding despite her parents' fears about safety and practicality. A military veteran dealing with PTSD and the loss of his leg in combat reached out to explore whether working with rescue horses might provide the kind of healing and purpose that traditional therapy had failed to deliver. Chen offered Marcus a permanent position at the rescue facility, recognizing his natural talent for working with traumatized horses and his ability to see potential where others saw only problems requiring expensive solutions with uncertain outcomes. Marcus accepted gratefully, understanding that he had found not just a job, but a calling that would allow him to continue making a difference in the lives of animals who needed second chances while developing his own skills and knowledge. The position came with opportunities to expand the facility's programs, including the development of therapeutic riding programs for children and adults with disabilities, educational workshops for other horse enthusiasts interested in rescue and rehabilitation work, and partnerships with local schools and community organizations that could benefit from exposure to the lessons that horses could teach about patience, persistence, and the rewards of caring for others. 6 months after their triumph at the county fair, Marcus and Sunny were invited to perform at the state fair, where their routine received even greater acclaim from a larger, more diverse audience that included professional horse trainers, disability advocates, and families from throughout the region who had heard about their story and traveled significant distances to witness their performance in person. The state fair performance led to additional opportunities at horse expos and rescue fundraisers throughout the region, where their partnerships served to raise awareness about the plight of neglected horses while demonstrating the possibilities that existed when people were willing to look beyond surface appearances to recognize hidden potential. Their story became a powerful fundraising tool for rescue organizations, their example inspiring donations and volunteer support from people who had been moved by proof that rescue work could produce results that went far beyond simply saving lives to include genuine transformation and achievement that benefited both animals and humans. Jake Hoffman eventually approached Marcus at a local restaurant several months after the fair, his usual arrogance replaced by something that might have been respect, his manner suggesting internal struggle between lifelong prejudices and undeniable evidence that contradicted his assumptions. "I was wrong about you," he said simply, the words clearly difficult for someone who rarely admitted error or showed vulnerability. "What you did with that horse, what you accomplished together, that took real courage and skill. I'm sorry for the things I said." Marcus accepted the apology graciously, understanding that Jake's previous hostility had probably stemmed from his own insecurities and limitations rather than genuine malice. that people often attacked others to avoid confronting their own failures or missed opportunities. Forgiveness came easily when you had learned that holding grudges was just another form of prison that kept you from moving forward toward better possibilities. The encounter served as a reminder that success could change not only the people who achieved it, but also those who witnessed it. That examples of triumph over adversity could inspire reconsideration of attitudes and assumptions that might have seemed permanently fixed. Marcus understood that his story had the power to influence others beyond simple inspiration, that it could challenge people to examine their own limitations and consider whether they were self-imposed rather than genuinely insurmountable. As Marcus looked toward the future, he saw possibilities that extended far beyond his own personal achievements to include programs and initiatives that could multiply the impact of what he and Sonny had accomplished together. He wanted to establish a comprehensive program that paired rescue horses with young people facing various challenges, creating opportunities for mutual healing and growth that could benefit entire communities. He envisioned a facility where children with disabilities could experience the same transformative partnership that had changed his life so dramatically, where military veterans dealing with trauma could find purpose and healing through working with animals who had also overcome significant challenges, where elderly people facing isolation and health problems could discover renewed meaning through caring for creatures who needed their attention and expertise. Sonny continued to thrive in her role as both performance partner and therapy horse, her gentle nature and intuitive understanding making her perfect for working with nervous or frightened beginners who needed patient encouragement rather than technical instruction. She seemed to understand that her purpose now extended beyond entertainment to something more meaningful and lasting, that her story could inspire others to believe in second chances and the possibility of transformation. Their regular performance schedule provided opportunities to share their message with diverse audiences while generating income to support the rescue facility and fund expansion of their programs. Each performance refined their routine and deepened their partnership while exposing new people to the principles they represented about perseverance, compassion, and the extraordinary results that could emerge from unlikely partnerships. The documentary film featuring their story premiered at regional film festivals, winning awards for inspirational content while generating national attention for rescue horse organizations and disability advocacy groups. The film's success led to television appearances and speaking engagements that provided platforms for Marcus to share his experiences with audiences who might never have considered the connections between animal rescue and human healing. Book publishers competed for rights to their story, recognizing the commercial potential in an account that combined multiple appealing elements while delivering positive messages that could inspire readers facing their own challenges. Marcus worked with a professional writer to ensure that their book accurately conveyed not just the facts of their journey, but the emotional and spiritual dimensions that had made their partnership so meaningful. Their story became a local legend, passed down through families and shared at community gatherings, as an example of what determination and compassion could accomplish when properly applied to situations that others might dismiss as hopeless. Parents used their example to teach children about perseverance, about looking beyond surface appearances, about the importance of giving second chances to those who had been written off by society. Teachers incorporated their story into lessons about overcoming adversity, about the scientific principles of animal behavior and training, about the mathematical concepts involved in calculating feed requirements and veterinary costs. Their partnership provided real-world examples that made abstract concepts concrete and meaningful for students who might otherwise struggle to see connections between classroom learning and practical applications. Marcus never forgot the moment when he first saw Sonny in that auction ring. Recognizing in her dejected posture and defeated spirit a reflection of his own struggles with acceptance and self-worth after the accident that had changed his life so dramatically. Their partnership had saved them both, proving that sometimes the most broken things could become the most beautiful when they found the right person willing to see their hidden potential and invest the time and effort necessary to help it flourish. Years later, when Marcus had become a respected horse trainer and therapist whose methods were studied by professionals throughout the region, he would often return in memory to that first performance at the Henderson County Fair as the moment when everything changed, when he realized that his limitations didn't define his possibilities, that courage came in many different forms, and that the most important victories were often achieved not by perfection, but by the simple willingness to try. The one-armed boy and his rescued horse had indeed left everyone crying that day at the fair, but they were tears of joy, inspiration, and hope, rather than sadness or pity. They had proven that second chances were worth fighting for, that broken things could be made whole again through patience and love, and that the most unlikely partnerships could create the most extraordinary magic when built on foundations of mutual respect and shared determination. In the quiet moments before sleep each night, Marcus would remember Sunny as she had been at the auction, nearly broken and forgotten by a world that had lost patience with her struggles and ridden her off as a liability rather than recognizing her potential. Then he would picture her as she was now, strong and confident and loved, living proof that transformation was always possible for those brave enough to believe in it and willing to do the work necessary to make belief into reality. Their story would continue for many years to come, touching lives and changing hearts wherever it was shared, a testament to the power of compassion, determination, and the unbreakable bonds that could form between kindred spirits who refused to give up on each other despite overwhelming evidence that success was impossible. Together, they had created something beautiful from the wreckage of their individual struggles, proving that the most meaningful victories often came not from strength or perfection, but from the courage to keep trying when everyone else had stopped believing that success was possible.